Monreagh Education and Health Heritage Centre this afternoon. It's hard to get Donegal people to move anywhere. It's hard to get them to move on a dry day, and it's worse on a wet day, and unfortunately the day is pretty wet. But it's a pleasure to welcome Karen here. We met earlier, and Karen, I think, originally Dublin,
yeah,
and is now living in the United States in New York. But you'll tell us something about that. And we look forward to hearing a little bit about the Scots-Irish rascals who made it to America. Now, not all the rascals, I'm afraid, went to America. There are one or two around here. And reminds me of something I was saying to people one time, and I said St. Johnston was the centre of the island of saints and scholars, and well known for its cricket. Somebody from the back shouted up, there are not many saints and less cricketers. So, Karen, we're delighted to have you, and for Stephanie and Kieran to get together to organise the launch of this book. And I look forward to getting one to get a read at it later on again. So, would you talk to us now? Thank you.
Thanks very much for coming out in the rain. I actually just came up from Dublin this morning and it rained the whole way. This is actually quite nice compared to what it was like on the way up. I'll read, if you're interested, I'll read a couple of passages from the book if you'd like. I wrote this book, actually the reason this book came around was I was covering I used to write for the Irish Times and the Irish Examiner from the States, and I covered the Iraq War at the time, and I covered American politics for the Examiner. And when I was covering the elections, I started noticing that people in Europe couldn't understand why Americans voted the way that they did. And it was a really, really interesting question to me, because most people are accustomed to sort of the northeast liberal way of voting, the democratic way of voting, because it's more like sort of European in its nature. But then in the south, nobody wants any government, any law, any taxes, any regulation of any sort. And so they always vote, at the moment they're voting Republican, because that's the values Republicans have. Plus the south is very, very Christian. And so there's such a remarkable difference between, say, the northeast, the blue states in America, which I'm sure you've all heard of, and the red states, that I started sort of looking in during the election to find out why, and I discovered the Scots-Irish were largely responsible. So I went sort of searching around to find out what it was about the south that made people have these very, very different. In the south, people have a very, very strong sense of religion, and a very strong sense of independence, and a very self-reliance, and a very, very strong sense of the importance of their own freedom to practice their own religion. So when I looked into it, first of all, I came across the moonshiners in the Appalachians, and went down and met this time with Junior Johnson, who had almost single-handedly invented NASCAR for early moonshine down the Appalachians. You've probably all heard this story. But what had started happening was and I actually drove in a whiskey car down Route 9, which is called Whiskey Highway in Georgia. And these little, you think these roads are small, these little tiny winding roads. And what was happening was the cars couldn't get around them, so they started what we call in America jerry-rigging them. I don't know what the word is here. While adjusting them, so to speak, to make them faster, to try to outrun the police, or as they say, the police. And then, being the kind of braggarts they are, would get together on a Sunday and go to some old racetrack in Georgia somewhere and race each other around. Well, these were the wildest cast of characters you could possibly have come across, and every single one of them was Scots-Irish, and there was the odd German in there. But by and large, 95% of them were Scots-Irish. And they actually have, from those racing around those old horse tracks on weekends, gradually grew into NASCAR. I mean, NASCAR now, a set of tires for a NASCAR costs $14,000. You know, they were putting together entire cars for $500, but they have created the biggest sport in America from that. And so I went down and I met them, and when I was down there talking to them, and driving around in these cars on the super speedways and stuff, I came across whole bunch of other people, and the whole story of the Scots-Irish in the South came to life. And so being a journalist, I didn't really want to just write a straightforward history book, because, you know, realistically, sort of in this day and age, particularly in America, people are really not that interested, unless you're a history buff, are really not going to go out and read a history book. So, and I thought it was such a shame, because it was such a good story that really was very, very underserved. And I thought, well, I'll just, as a journalist, I was so used to writing stories really where people were the focal point, that I decided, since these characters are still alive and kicking, this is not the history of the Ulster Scots leaving America in 1717 and that was all she wrote. They're still alive and still very, very much aware of their own heritage.